All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live once again on Levi Cahn, and I have been advertising this all week about interviewing Daniel John Lee. I've interviewed him 3 times on this channel before. We'll just say 2 times really for quality, since he was having internet issues the very first time. That being said, I'm going to let him take the role here in a couple of minutes about exposing the pedophile rings in governments, plural, and Hollywood. Give out specific names. He has the sources. And what we should do as believers in this. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, before I do this, a couple of announcements. My wife will be putting out the PayPal link for us. She got a confirmation. She gets more visions in that than I do. Mine are so rare. But she got a vision that evidently we need $6,000 before our lease ends, and we need to be relocated with our ministry. That's the main announcement for that. Also, too, if you want to help me be able to do this ministry full time, ladies and gentlemen, our PayPal link is always also put below each video that we do now. And I don't know if it's on yet or not. If it isn't, she'll get it on.
It is.
Yep. No, it's not. I don't see it. But either way, it'll be on there. So that being said, yes, $6,000 fly in the wall. Anyway, I don't like doing this, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I did it so rarely before. But the fact and truth of the matter is, if somebody is going to be in full-time ministry and being on, in this world, we do need finances. And I do work a full-time job. I have no problem with that. But just keep in mind, I cannot get to requests nearly as soon as you may like me to. And sometimes not at all. Frankly, I don't think even 25% of the requests that I get sent on Gmail or on my comments, because I have, I'm busy with a family and with a job and so on. I'd love for this to be my full-time job, this ministry of Levi Cahn and God's Holy Walking Saints Ministry, Merle and Deborah Como. But I can't do it right now. Are there any other announcements before I get Dan going here?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, people, we cannot do this, the Great Commission, without your prayer and without your help. And with your donations, you can make this ministry and all its members spread throughout wherever the Father sends us to go.
Yep. Not only that, but let's think of something simple here, a very simple mathematical term. The man who I'm going to be having take over here in a couple of minutes, Daniel, he now has over 22,000 subbers. I think he only had around 15,000 subbers when I mentioned it to him. I do not want you people to break or short yourselves. Just imagine if out of 22,000 plus subbers, only one subber gave $1 each month. Well, Daniel would easily be able to do his ministry full time, over $22,000 a month. So I'm saying it is not imperative that you give like the TV evangelists insist that you do. That is a bunch of bogus. So I just, I think I have around 299 to 300 subbers. Only, give what is convenient. I do not believe in the tithes of your paychecks of either net or gross. That's not really biblical. You can give a free will offering. And if we were to frankly try and tithe like scriptures, especially back in the Tanakh, I'm not even sure how we can do it right now. We're still scattered in that. So I want to make it clear. I'm not here to pick your wallets. But if you want me to be able to do this for you more, I need your financial assistance, and I definitely need your prayers. I know I'm getting attacked and falsely slandered. I know Daniel John Lee has been, because I keep track of his stuff pretty close. Help us with the Great Commission, and help us definitely with this evil to shout it at the rooftops, because frankly, folks, and I know Daniel has said this, and I mean it just as intensely as he does, if not more so. I want these people to be detained. I want them to be arrested. I want them to be charged. I want them to be tried, and I want them to be executed. And it's, not just for the pedophilia, not just for the pedivore, not just for the kidnapping, that as well, and also other things they have done to us. Okay, Daniel, what I'm going to have you do is update people and your sources. Feel free to give out names of high priests or whatever they're doing, what their interactions have been with victims, as long as you have the victims okay to give their names. But from the last interview, you had quite a bit to say, but keeping track of you lately, you have a lot more information. So why don't you go ahead and take the floor?
Yeah, it seems like every day something new happens and there's a new development. And this past week has just been probably the craziest and wildest ride that I've had yet doing this. And I just want to add on to something you said earlier before I begin, and that is I make it also very clear that everything I do, I'm doing for free. I give away everything I have for free. And even on my PayPal button, it says, make sure you give your money first to widows and orphans. That's where I want your tithes to go. And if you have anything above and beyond that, you can send it my way to help me. I certainly don't need $22,000 a month. I just need a few thousand to be able to do this full time. And that's what I want to do. And I'm doing this because I desperately want these sick, wicked pedophiles, pedivores, satanic cabals to be exposed. I want our innocent children protected. Fiona Barnett herself has told me personally a number of times, thank you, Daniel, for standing up for us and making this issue even more. And hopefully others will do that as well. I don't mind competition. I want as many people as possible to be making YouTube channels and to be shouting from the rooftops about this, because I really believe this is the battle of our day, to take down these satanic cabal pedophiles. And of course, I tend to center on the ones that are at the top of the pyramid so that we can bring it all down. So it's very, very, very important to me. But yeah, there's been a lot of developments just this week alone. I started the week with Nathan Stolperman at Lift the Veil had asked me to come on to his show. And I was a little rattled by the interview, not much, but I mean, he definitely, it wasn't a softball interview, but it, I think at the end it turned out well. I made it very clear that whatever you think of President Trump, if you look at his actions over the past 2 years, this president, more than any president we've ever had, is cracking down on child sex trafficking. You Google Operation Broken Heart. Look at the giant child sex ring he busted up in Miami. And you compare those numbers to Obama or to George W. Bush or to Bill Clinton or George Bush Sr. or even Reagan. And Trump has gone way above and beyond any president we've had, certainly in modern history, of cracking down on these child sex trafficking. Now, so far, he's targeted sort of the low and mid-level ones. Although, if you follow Q and if you are looking at kind of behind the scenes at what's going on, it appears Trump is getting ready to hit the top of this pyramid in some pretty significant ways. So we're all waiting and hoping to see what happens. So that's how my week started, was with Nathan. And then the most explosive story of all the videos I posted, and I had different news pieces that I put out this week, because I literally had like 7 or 8 news stories I was working at once, plus trying to do my full-time 40-hour-a-week job. So I was just like kind of going crazy, trying to get everything organized and having the time to do all this. But the next one was Maddie Nabozny, who had approached me, and he said, Daniel, we've got to get the story out about Jim Carrey. I saw your first video about it, and I've got some information. Marley Boone and her missing daughter, Beth Boone, they want this out. Certainly Marley does, because the more exposure this gets, the safer she'll be, and the more exposure Jim Carrey will get. And so I was like, okay, give it to me. And then I asked, can I use your first and last name? Can I use Marley's first and last name? And he said, yes, please do it. Get the story out. So I did. I put it up, and then within a day or two, my source did a complete 180. Sounded completely different. This strange guy named Eli Priest, who supposedly down in Australia with all these mega drops, comes out of the blue. And first he says that Marley Boone is a complete fraud. But then Maddie and Isaac Cappy and these guys say, this story is so hot and so true that it's actually classified and you need to take this down. So who's telling me the truth here? So I knew something was fishy. I personally believe that the original story that Maddie gave me is true, that I'm praying for Beth to be found, and that someone has gotten to Maddie and to Isaac Cappy and to even Eli Priest and put some pressure on them to get me to take my video down. I personally think it's probably Jim Carrey working through Eli Priest to try to cover his butt and get this taken down. And quite frankly, I'm not surprised that this is the one video that caused the most blowback. I mean, even YouTube has now filed a complaint for a privacy violation on me for that and is investigating it. Well, they haven't filed the complaint yet, but they've opened the investigation. And I'm not surprised because Jim Carrey is the highest satanic priest in over the Hollywood region. He was the Illuminati asked George Lucas to step down a number of years ago, and Jim Carrey took his place. And a lot of people say, no, Daniel, you're wrong. It wasn't George Lucas originally. It was Martin Scorsese. No, Martin Scorsese is the high priest over in New York, not Hollywood. There's all these different regions. So people have to understand that. But Jim Carrey's the highest one right now, and that's why all this blowback is happening. So I've stuck to my guns. I've showed YouTube the evidence and the proof that my sources clearly told me in writing that I could use their names. And so I'm waiting for YouTube's decision. But, Fiona Barnett will be the first to tell you, and this applies to every SRA victim, or I should say SRA survivor out there. The more publicity, the more the victim comes out and in public, the more the perpetrator is exposed, the safer everyone is. So I don't buy this thing that somehow the military is going to, knock down my door and throw me in a jail cell, and that I'm putting people in danger for putting this story out. It doesn't make sense. And I've asked, in fact, someone who's claiming to be Marley Boone has contacted me and basically spouting the same stuff that Maddie said when he got turned. And so I've asked her to call me twice now so I can verify it's her. And she's had excuses of why she can't call me, but I've asked her to call me so we can work this out, figure out what's going on. But, and I asked her the same thing. I said, why were you so insistent that Maddie, a journalist, I make sure that I have my sources. I make sure they're confirmed and corroborated. And I'm not going to be intimidated by, this Eli Priest guy. I had spoken highly of him just this past Monday when I was interviewed by Nathan, because he'd had this mega drop of all this stuff that was supposedly coming out. And then he comes out of the blue and starts attacking me, cussing me out, saying, this Jim Carrey video is disinformation, blah, 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 blah. Well, what is it, Eli Priest? Is it disinformation? Or is it like your buddy Isaac Cappy says, and like Maddie says, it's so hot and so true, it's got to be taken down? Come on, something's not adding up. So anyway, I do believe it's true, and I believe Jim Carrey needs to be exposed. He needs to be arrested, prosecuted, and publicly executed. So that was the main kind of big thing that happened, and it caused a huge flare-up, because Fiona Barnett knows these people, and Isaac Cappy's obviously connected, and then all that. So it caused a big flare-up in this whole community. And then I stuck to my guns and then continued to do more pieces. I did one on this McDonald's location in the UK that's connected to a swimming pool with the Hampstead kids. And I absolutely believe the Hampstead kids' testimony. I mean, anyone who knows children knows that they can't just make up these intricate details on their own. They just can't. They are so specific in what happens, and they're just little kids. No one can coach them like that it's obvious that the things they're saying are true. And these are SRA survivors, just like Fiona Barnett. And it's just, to me, it's amazing because in that particular video, which is the one about the satanic cabal at McDonald's, I show an interview in 1989 where Oprah interviews this woman named Vicky, who is part of a satanic ritual family that goes all the way back in her lineage to the 1700s. And the same things she describes in 1989 are the exact same things these two little kids describe in 2014 in England. So 30 years apart, two different locations, two different types of people describing the same types of things. And furthermore, Fiona Barnett describes the same type of things on her. So it is clear this stuff is going on, it's happening, and people need to wake up, and we've got to get these people stopped, arrested, publicly tried, prosecuted, and publicly executed.
Okay, now if all this information ends up coming to be true, Daniel, I have this odd feeling with the way our nation is, even if they do execute a lot of them, it's not going to be public. That's just kind of how our system works, but and only certain people would be allowed to come and see that happen. So,
well, I have a response to that.
Okay.
So, in pre-colonial America, they did do public floggings and public execution. So I do believe, see, right now we're under maritime law, admiralty law that started in 1871, made creeps, really started getting in 1913, and then was pretty much had a major foothold by World War II. This maritime law, admiralty law that we're under presently, this judicial system, it's completely anti-constitutional, completely anti-biblical. We need to revert back to the common law that's rooted in the United States Constitution, which really has its roots in the Torah and the Bible itself. And you and I know that Torah definitely sanctions public execution because public execution goes a long way in curbing crime. So I do believe that we can revert back to the common law that is rooted in the Constitution of the United States, and that if we do so, that these people can be publicly executed. And furthermore, I'd like to just add a little prophetic layer to this as well, being on your channel. I think that initially this is going to be a great victory, and that we'll see a lot of these people get publicly executed, maybe even using the guillotines or public hanging. But eventually, down the road, when the son of perdition arises, and we go through that 3.5-year tribulation, those very guillotines that are being used to actually execute the evil guys will be turned on the saints of the Most High. And of course, that's when, hopefully, we've prepared to be part of that woman in Revelation 12, where we can flee into the wilderness. So I do think that these public executions will happen. I think it's going to eventually play into prophecy. And just like a lot of things, it'll start off good, be great, be used rightly, but then, of course, the devil always gets in until Messiah returns. So that's kind of my response to you about why I think this is likely to happen. Now, will it happen initially? Maybe not, because right now you have to remember Trump is going after things like with Hillary and Obama, who are definitely both satanic pedophiles. He's going after them based off their illegal interference with the election, and hopefully once we get this whole situation resolved with Kavanaugh, those FISA records will be completely declassified, and then the dominoes will start falling to implicate Obama and Hillary in interfering with the 2016 election, which is just quite frankly, the least of their crimes, because being a traitor, of course, is bad. Interfering with election is bad, but murdering babies and eating them and raping them is probably even much, much worse. So he's going after this right now, just like with Al Capone. They had to get him on tax evasion rather than all the other crimes he did. But I do believe that eventually this stuff, hopefully, will come to light, because like the video I did with on Kenneth Copeland, which really stirred up a lot of people, and what's going on with Oral Roberts University, this stuff has got to be exposed. We can't just gloss it over or just say, well, yeah, there's a pedophilia problem and we need to prosecute some here or there. No, there's satanic baby raping rituals going on. It's got to be exposed. It's got to be stopped. And I do not want one more baby or child damaged in this country. Why should we have to live in a nation like that when supposedly we're supposed to be a republic with a constitution where in God we trust? Well, which God are we serving? Because if we're doing all this stuff and allowing all this stuff to happen, it's certainly not the Hebrew God of the Bible. Sounds like Moloch or one of these pagan gods where they sacrifice their babies. So that's my response to you on that.
Well, if they do end up doing public executions, I have no problem with that, and I'm aware of the history too. Also, too, where they put the cigarette in the man's mouth, have his eyes covered with some kind of a wrapping or a bandana, and then they would shoot him or her. I'm aware of all that. I know my history pretty well. I'm just, as long as I have, and I think public executions would be great. Don't get me wrong on that, but as long as they're executed somehow, some way after it's insurmountable evidence that they are guilty of all of this, then yeah, that's punishable by death. So I'm trying to think what I was going to ask. Can you talk? Well, yeah, actually, Oral Roberts University. Like I said, I keep up on your videos. I've watched a little of Fiona Barnett now. I admire her testimony and having the iron guts that she does, being able to go into the same building where she was mistreated, to put it nicely. But can you tell us a little bit about what you were talking about on one of your videos with Oral Roberts University, Kenneth Copeland, the late Oral Roberts, Billy Graham,
Yeah, and I'm actually in correspondence with the woman who, as a little girl and a teen was, saw all this stuff that happened. And, she got a lot of harassment before when she came out about this. And so she just doesn't want to go through that again. But yeah, there's 3 layers of tunnels that are underneath Oral Roberts University. Most people don't know about them. And, there were these candles and there was an altar, and she saw everything. And she saw Kenneth Copeland there. She saw this man in black who would abuse her, and that, of course, was Dr. Mengele. I now know how to pronounce his name now, who was the crazy, wacky doctor that helped Adolf Hitler. And if you know anything about Operation Paperclip, a lot of these Nazis were brought over to the United States shortly after World War II. They were not executed at the Nuremberg trials, and they were brought over here as undercover people. And so Dr. Mengele was in the United States and lived until I forget when he died. I think it was in the late 70s, but in the 60s and 70s, when this woman was a young girl and a teen, this is when this happened to her, and he was messing with her sexually, and these other people, and her dad, basically knew about all this. He was a Freemason, one of the low-level Freemasons, but he was trying to get higher, and one of the ways they get higher is by allowing their children to be used like this. It's really, really sick. It's really disgusting. But yeah, there was these 3 levels, and she describes it in detail. And I don't want to go into the details here because, the scripture does say, be simple in the ways of evil, and whatsoever is good, whatsoever is right, whatsoever is pure, think on these things. So I don't want to go into that again because I think I did it enough on that video. But I will say that, Kenneth Copeland, they do these things in terms of the raping and the pedophile and the cannibalism. They do these things in order to gain a satanic anointing. That's what they do. And this is why Kenneth Copeland's worth, what is it, $300 million, because this is what he does. And he, first of all, he preaches this false prosperity gospel that a lot of Christians are savvy to, but it goes much deeper and darker than that, and unfortunately, I don't think Trump understands the depth of this particular element. And that's why he had people like that around him, praying for him, because I don't think he has a clue about this particular element of the pedophile thing that's going on. Hopefully he does now. I'm sure he does now because he has great intel. So I'm sure he knows what's going on now with all the information that's coming out. But, this really hits home with me because I was raised in a Christian household, and then I returned to my Hebrew Jewish roots when I was a young man. And for people to pretend to be a gospel preacher like Billy Graham and Kenneth Copeland or Roberts, and then to find out that they, are serial pedophiles and even worse, pedivores, eating and cannibalizing babies. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I told a story on that video that I'd like to repeat here. And that is, if you know about Keith Green was such a great musician, really anointed. He was actually Jewish. He converted to the Messiah, was converted during the Jesus movement of the 60s and 70s. And he just had a powerful music career. And unfortunately, he was killed as a young man when he was 28. His plane had problems and it went down. The official story is they were careless, but I don't buy it. I don't think Keith Green was careless. I think the Vatican messed with his plane because he had these Last Days Ministries newsletters, and he was pounding the Vatican Church so hard that he was even having difficulty getting concerts in Protestant churches because the Protestants were so upset with how hard he was coming against the Catholics. Anyway, he he tells a story in the biography that his wife wrote after he died. It's called No Compromise. I highly recommend that book, by the way. No Compromise. I've read it so many times, and it is the most inspiring book I've ever read in terms of a modern believer who really sold out everything to the Messiah and affected our culture in a dramatic way, by the way. But in any way, he tells a story, and this happened in I think it's the early 80s or late 70s, where he's at Oral Roberts University and he's playing his piano, and there's actually the spirit of conviction begins to start coming down on this meeting. And I think it was either Oral Roberts' son or some prominent student at the university stands up and begins to confess his sin of homosexuality. And so this is a genuine revival. This is not people wiggling around on the floor or all this crap that we see at the Toronto crazy stuff or whatever. This is genuine repentance revival like we read about in the First and Second Great Awakening. And then as soon as that happened, the leadership of Oral Roberts University shut it down. They said, stop it. They told Keith Green to get out of there. And Keith Green recounts how he was so grieved because he knew a revival was getting ready to start from the center of America. And I'd always wondered, why did they shut it down? I mean, obviously, I understand the embarrassment they may have felt by this guy confessing to his homosexual sin in public, but why did they shut it down? Well, now I know, because there was much more worse even than homosexuality going on. There was this pedivore stuff going on 3 levels below the complex that no one had a clue about other than the leadership and the people that were being abused. So this stuff has caused our nation to just be under a dramatic curse, and this has got to be broken. And quite frankly, I don't think any of this would be discussed or brought out to light if Trump had not been elected. God has used Trump to create an atmosphere in this country where we can actually start talking about this stuff and not getting shut down and not getting intimidated. And I believe it's going to grow more and more and more and more. And it's going to be so great that, like what Q says, they're not even going to be able to walk the streets anymore. These people that are, so loved by so much of society, they're not even going to be able to walk the streets because people are going to know. They're going to know what these evil people have been doing.
Okay, I just want to respond to some of this about public executions being ignorant. I'm looking in Deuteronomy chapter 17. I'll start with verse 6. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, shall he that is worthy of death be put to death. But at the mouth of 1 witness, he shall not be put to death. The hands of the witnesses shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people. That's pretty public. So thou shalt put the evil away from among you. If there arise a matter too hard for thee in judgment, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, and between stroke and stroke, being matters of controversy within thy gates, then shalt thou arise and get thee up into the place which Yahweh the Elohim shall choose, and thou shalt come unto the priests, the Levites, and unto the judge that shall be in those days, and inquire, and they shall shew thee the sentence of judgment. And thou shalt do according to the sentence which they of that place which Yahweh shall choose shall shew thee, and thou shalt observe to do according to all that they inform thee, according to the sentence of the law which they shall teach thee, and according to the judgment which they shall teach thee, thou shalt do. Thou shalt not decline from the sentence which they shall shew thee to the right hand nor to the left. And the man that will do presumptuously and will not hearken unto the priest that standeth to minister there before Yahweh thy Elohim, or unto the judge, even that man shall die. And thou shalt put away the evil from Israel, and all the people shall hear and fear, and do no more presumptuously. So no, executions publicly are not ignorant, and it shows other people what happens for that kind of stuff, and it makes them think a little bit whether they want to pull those stunts or not. Thirdly, as far as Yeshua disagreeing with the Mosaic law according to Matthew 5 verses 38 and 39, that's being taken out of context. I'll read it. Let me get to it. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which is in the Torah. It's in Exodus, by the way, and Deuteronomy. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Let's do 40. And if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. Well, for starters, are you having those kind of fights between a fellow believer or not? I have no problem taking a non-believer to court or doing something back. Whereas I'm really trying to, in love, to turn the other cheek and work it out, reason with this brother or sister. So, secondly, what's the context here? If Daniel was to do something to me, like get angry at me on the phone and cuss at me, what am I supposed to do? Cuss him back? No, I'm going to treat him with love, hopefully. If I'm, hopefully you don't wake me up, like, say, and I've got 15 seconds awake only. I don't know how I'd react, but my point is, or if I cussed him out, is he just going to cuss me back, or is he going to try and calm me down a little bit? Now, when we're talking right out views of smiting somebody on the cheek, let them have the other, or are they taking away our whole lives, going after our families, and so on? There's different contexts of that, folks. Not only that, Torah or Yeshua was having to bring back the Torah and get those people out of the false teachings of commandments of men and oral laws, which today we call Talmuds. And it's all in there. I've read all of the Babylonian Talmuds. So before statements get put into the side chat, I really wish you'd do your research a little bit more. All of you.
Yeah, I'd like to just add something on to what you said.
Sure.
So if you read the context of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth in the Torah, it's very clear that the context of that is it has to be done in a judicial process where the elders, like you said, you got the two witnesses, you got 2 or 3 witnesses, you got the elders who have agreed that there's been a trial, a law, they've been prosecuted. That's where that eye for an eye, tooth for tooth is put into place. And we see that happening even today in today's judicial system, as corrupt as it is. What Yahshua was teaching against was, like what you're saying, there were a lot of oral laws that had nothing to do with Torah, where it said you could go out and you could just do personal vigilante style justice and do an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Well, that's not what the written Torah says, but people were doing that in the first century. And so Yahshua is saying, you guys are completely whacked out. That's not even what the written Torah says. This is what you've heard it says. This is what these rabbis are teaching you because they're teaching Talmud, not the written Torah. Here's what the Torah actually teaches, and here's the intent behind it. So Yahshua is very clear, and he even says in Matthew 5, think not that I come to abolish the Torah. I come not to abolish, but to fill up, to revive it, to show you how to properly obey it out of a heart of love. And then he says, until the heavens and earth pass away, not one jot or one tittle in my Torah will pass away. Well, you go outside, the sky's still above you, the earth's still beneath you. So according to Jesus's own words, the Torah cannot be passed away, or that would make him a liar. And the heavens and earth will not pass away until after the 1,000-year millennial kingdom, when we get the new heavens and new earth. And only then will some elements of Torah pass away, such as there'll be no longer any sacrifices, blood won't be shed, because it's the new heavens and new earth. But even in the millennial kingdom, the 1,000-year reign after Messiah's returned, and we've been resurrected and we're ruling and reigning with him over those who survived the tribulation, even during that time, according to Zechariah 14, there are animal sacrifices being done. In the last chapters of Ezekiel, there are animal sacrifices being done. Has nothing to do with atonement, of course. They're just pointing back toward what Messiah did, or they're being done as like oblations, like the morning and evening oblation. So the animal sacrifices back then, before the cross, pointed toward the cross, and when they happen in the millennial kingdom, they'll be pointing back toward the cross. In fact, even Paul in Acts chapter 21, I believe, participates in an animal sacrifice. This is many, many years after he becomes a believer in Messiah. And he completes his Nazarene vow, which, if you go to Torah, requires you to offer an offering. I think it's a turtle dove or a small animal. He does that. He goes to the temple. He does that to prove that he's not teaching against Torah. He does this as a believer in Messiah. And the only reason we don't do sacrifices today is there's no temple. There's no sanctified temple to do it. And there won't be a sanctified temple to do proper animal sacrifices until we get resurrected to be with Yahshua in the clouds and return with him. Any type of temple that happens before then will, of course, be eventually inhabited by the son of perdition. And I don't recommend you having anything to do with that at all. But these animal sacrifices don't replace Yahshua's atonement. Yahshua's atonement is the penultimate sacrifice. Only by his blood can we be cleansed. But they're shadow pictures, and they either point forward or point back. The whole Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is consistent. It doesn't contradict itself. and it's actually very, very beautiful.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that a little bit too, because when you were quoting Matthew 5, verses 17 and 18, continue this on because I always tell people to keep reading. Matthew 24:35, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. And it's also in Luke 21, because I've had to use this in Pal Talk a lot with Greasy Grace of Christians. Luke 21:33, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. I have this odd feeling when we are with Yeshua, for those of us who endure and stay steadfast. When we eat with him, we're not going to be having a drunken orgy and a pork roast, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't picture that at all. And I'm a guy with a broad imagination. But it's not in there. It's never been okayed, and it never will be. Now, if you're talking about the sacrifices, also a good place to go to for the 1,000-year millennial reign is Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48. And there will be sin yet, iniquity, and there will be animal sacrifices, and there will be requirements, as well as in Zechariah 14, I think, about going there and presenting yourselves. Believe it or not, us men need to be physically circumcised. And it's not talking about salvation. I know what that's about. There's plenty of quotes in the Brit Hadashah. For salvation, it's no longer required. But when you present yourself for the three main feasts, which are described in detail in Leviticus 23, you need to be physically circumcised. And yes, we will be doing animal sacrifices. And from what I can tell, it will be there will be sacrifices of a memorial of what Yeshua did for us, being the final atonement and giving us the connection back to the Father through him, which is, you can read that in context in Colossians chapter 2, verses 13 and 14. That's what's been nailed to the cross, the divorce, ladies and gentlemen. The Father had no choice but to divorce us when we were spiritually adulterous, spiritually failing the Numbers chapter 5 test. He had no choice, but according to Deuteronomy 24, but to divorce us, and really being defiled, he couldn't take us back. There had to be a sufficient atonement, and animal sacrifices just didn't cut it. And that's where Yeshua came into play, because not only was he blemishless, sinless, and innocent like the animals, he had the intellectual power to say yea or nay. Obviously, he said yea. He willingly laid down his life at the commandment of the Father. So, and I could get into deeper, about how Yeshua, his stomach was, protruding out, and his thighs were wasting away and all that, which again goes along with Numbers chapter 5. But that's why I keep telling you folks, and all the time that I've been advertising Daniel John Lee here, I've also said that I am in agreement with him. I think we will go into some kind of golden era. However, it is going to be very easy for people to get lazy and complacent when things are going really great. And then when the Pseudo Mashiach, which is Antichrist, comes into play, you can be easily fooled that way. Why? Because you're not studying Yah's word. You're not being in communion with him that way. There are a lot of so-called believers out there, and some of them may genuinely be right now. But if you get slack and you walk away, and you don't just have to acknowledge it coherently and say, "Hey, Lord, I'm walking away from you." If you're not praying, if you're not studying the Word, the Torah, and the rest of the Tanakh and the New Testament, you're walking away from Him. You're not doing a modern day Shema. So, if you want Yah to honor you, you need to honor Him. He has given us this so freely, to where we really, most of us, maybe not all of us in the world, but most of us in this world have no excuse. You have it. All of you who are watching on the internet, you can probably easily find 200 versions in the English alone. So you can walk to a church and ask for a free Bible if you're that broke. And if they say no, walk down the street to another one and ask for one. I do. I use the internet, folks. When I'm really reading, I prefer a book, and I have plenty of them. And So I'm just making a point here. I'm
I'd
kind
like
of
to-
I'm kind of getting scattered here, but to sit here and
Yeah,
say
no, I'd
that,
like to add some stuff here too.
go ahead.
So first of all, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you're going to go into this battle to expose Satan's deepest and darkest secrets about this stuff, you've got to be filled with the Holy Spirit, washed in the blood, and obeying his word in prayer. Otherwise, Satan's going to chew you up and spit you out. That's why a lot of these people that get involved with this stuff and they don't have an intimate relationship with Christ, they wind up getting blowback. I mean, even Nathan told me I've kind of drawn back because of all the intense blowback I was getting about covering the child sex trafficking. So you've got to really have an intimate relationship with Messiah if you're going to go into this stuff. I think that's why Fiona Barnett has done so well, because she does keep Shabbat and she does do Passover and she does keep the word of God. And that's why she's been so protected and able to, but even she's had to deal with a lot of, persecution. So you really got to do that. I want to clarify a few things about what we're talking about here, because there might be some confusion. So in Zechariah 14, just like you said, it speaks of a time where all nations who survive the tribulation will be commanded to go up to Jerusalem every year to keep the Feast of Sukkot, which is one of the last of the fall feasts that we're commanded to do every year. And any nation that refuses to do so will not get any rain. They'll have a drought. So yeah, you're right. There will be some sin going on. It's not going to be as much, because during that 1,000-year time, Satan and his devils will be bound in the abyss, and Yahshua will be ruling and reigning. We will have already been resurrected. We get resurrected in that first resurrection that Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians 4 at that seventh trumpet, which is toward the great end of the Great Tribulation. We will have already been resurrected. We meet Yahshua in the clouds. We're there. We come down with him, and we rule and reign with him in our resurrected bodies, which, of course, those resurrected bodies will be perfect and pure and circumcised and everything. It'll be beautiful. But there will be those who survived the tribulation, okay, that didn't take the mark of the beast, but also didn't repent, so they weren't resurrected at that seventh trumpet resurrection. And those survivors, those mortals, will be ruling and reigning over, and Jerusalem will be a praise in all the earth. And so it talks about in Malachi chapter 3, it says in verse 2, it says, "But who may abide the day of Yahshua's coming? And who shall stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and like a fuller's soap. And he, the Messiah of Israel, shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. And he shall purify the sons of Levi and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto Yahweh an offering in righteousness. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto Yahweh, as in the days of old and as in former years." So this is talking about the second return of Yahshua, not his first return, but his second, when he comes as a blazing refiner's fire. And it says he's going to restore the Levitical order, and they're going to do the priestly sacrifices. Everything Israel should have done, but they kept getting into sin and things like that, they're now going to do. They're going to actually fulfill their call for 1,000 years with Yahshua reigning as king. And so these sacrifices will be done. Now, we are going to be in our resurrected bodies, as is Yahshua. And I don't think, we're maybe going to be directly involved with all the bloody gore of the sacrifices, but that's kind of what these Levites will be doing, and these mortals who survived. Remember, when that seventh trumpet resurrection happens, and those two witnesses rise from the dead in Revelation 11:11. People ask me, is 11:11 significant? Yeah, read Revelation 11:11. You'll find out what 11:11 means. Those two witnesses rise from the dead Messiah rise first, just like Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 4, and then we who are alive and remain get caught up as well. And it says that when that happens, there's this massive earthquake in Jerusalem, and 7,000 of these people in Jerusalem die, but the rest give glory to Yah. So finally, right at this resurrection time, that's when a lot of these Jewish people in Jerusalem finally repent and give their glory to Yah. So it's probably those mortals who survived the Great Tribulation into the millennial kingdom that will be doing these sacrifices, where Yah will refine and purify the Levites. We in our resurrected bodies will be like the angels, ruling and reigning with the Messiah. It says in Ezekiel that David will be resurrected at that time. He will literally be the prince in the Jerusalem area. Of course, Yahshua is going to be the global king. And we will rule and reign over different parts of the earth as princes and priests underneath the head king, Yahshua the Messiah. And And that's why when you read Ezekiel, it's the prince that's always involved in these sacrifices, David, who's resurrected as well, but he's overseeing all this stuff. So it's going to be an incredible time. What's interesting about that is that Satan has a counterfeit. He wants to bring the counterfeit before the millennial kingdom, because you read about the ascended masters, and they're going to look like these amazing interdimensional beings, and the son of perdition will be fully possessed by Satan. So he's going to have a counterfeit millennium before we get to the real millennium. And it's my personal theory at this point, and I know we don't know the day or the hour, but Yahshua did say we can know the times and seasons. But it's my personal belief right now that, these solar eclipses, we had the first one in 2017, and it, crossed across America from Oregon all the way down to Georgia. And that was in 2017. And then 7 years later, during the spring feast, right around the spring feast in 2024, we'll have an opposite eclipse going from, was it Arizona or California, all the way up to New England. X marks the spot. There's an X that's formed right over the center of our country. And it's my belief that these two eclipses give us this 7-year time period where America's under a reprieve with Trump, and where we're giving an opportunity to have a harvest and really reach out and do the things Yah wants us to do to bring as many people to him as possible. And then during that late winter, early springtime of 2024, that will be when the Great Tribulation begins, when it's dark and no man will work. The two witnesses will be out preaching, starting on, if it does happen, it would start on Lamb Day, 4 days prior to Passover, because 1,260 days after Lamb Day in 2024 is exactly the Feast of Trumpets in 2027. So they'll start their ministry, and the rest of us will either get persecuted and get our heads cut off by the son of perdition in the largest Holocaust of history, or we'll be part of that Revelation 12 woman that goes into the wilderness in some undisclosed location, and we're protected for 3.5 years while the son of perdition is basically allowed by Yahweh to cause a delusion so great that it deceives every single person who has not a love for the truth. And that will last for 42 months, 3.5 years. A lot of people say, no, Daniel, you're missing the whole 7-year period. Well, if you study the scroll of Daniel, Daniel says there's a 7-year period, but in Revelation, it only mentions 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. And the reason is because that first 3.5 years was fulfilled by the Messiah of Israel. It says the Messiah was cut off in the midst of the week. And he was cut off on the stake and shed his blood on Passover 2,000 years ago. And so he fulfilled that first 3.5 years in his ministry 2,000 years ago. And then the clock stopped. It stopped for the time of the Gentiles, 2,000 years. And that 3.5-year clock will begin again to complete the rest of that 7-year period when the son of perdition arises. And I believe that what will happen is at the end of this 7 years, that's when the United States will be destroyed by Russia and China in nuclear war. And out of the ashes of that world war, the son of perdition will arise and rule and reign from Jerusalem in his tabernacle that he plants between the sea and Mount Zion. And that's where he'll rule and reign. And, it's interesting that no one bows before the Pope and kisses his ring. Everyone bows before the Pope and kisses his ring, except two organizations. Trump never did it, hallelujah, but also the newly formed Sanhedrin that was formed in 2008 in Jerusalem, that head rabbi does not. In fact, there's a picture of the Pope kneeling before that head rabbi kissing his ring, because the son out of Israel, he will be ruling and reigning. He will serve a God of forces, the Kabbalah, Talmudic, dark Zionist forces. He will look glorious. He will be able to call down fire from the sky. He will have a counterfeit Shekinah glory cloud over him in this temple. And everyone will think, oh, this is the Mashiach. Everyone will. Because right now what's happening is I was talking to Victor about this, the ex-Mason who testified this. The old cabal is being brought down by the new cabal. So they're bringing down the Jesuits and the Vatican and the Catholic down Islam. They're bringing down the pedophiles, a lot of these cabals, but it's going to be eventually replaced by the new cabal. And that'll happen, I believe, about 6 years from now in 2024.
Okay, Dan,
Yeah.
I want you to make this clear whether you are actually making an actual prophecy of 2024 or if it's just your guess.
It's just my theory. I mean, I've had like 2 or 3 other believers who've come to the same conclusion that I have had no contact with. So it's just my theory at this point. But to me, it makes sense. You know, it makes sense. But we'll have to see if that's what happens. But I guess the one thing I just want to caution about is so many people think we're just heading into this golden age and it's going to last forever. And that really is a deception. We definitely are in a great time. This is an exciting time. Don't get me wrong. I'm for Trump. I got this petition I want people to sign. I got an event on November 9th at the White House. So I'm all for that. But we just have to understand that in the future, this prophecy in Revelation will occur. It's written. It's going to happen. Yahweh's word does not change. So that's my main point about that.
Well, I wanted you to make it clear to people because I know I'm going to get, and I'm fine with this. I don't care. You and I were talking about this before we went live. I'm going to get some backlash on this. And hey, Daniel just gave a false prophecy. You let this go on your channel, and I knew what you were going to say, but I wanted you to make this clear to people yourself. So whatever backlash I get, so be it. It's not a big deal to me. At least this way they have no excuse. If it does go longer than that, folks, if it doesn't start by 2024, so be it. I have no problem with it. I'm more than anything looking forward to seeing more people busted for pedophilia, pedivore, illegally taking our money. Evidently, we want to talk about that a little bit, to where I think all of us as individuals are owed $100,000 a month for at least 11 years. Is that right? Can you clear this up?
Yeah. So, and I have to, what's interesting about you bringing that up, I got to recheck some of that intel because some of that came from this Eli Priest guy who seems to have dubious motives at this point. But yeah, there's basically a global reset that's talked about where, there's trillions and trillions and trillions of gold and precious metals that's being held by the current satanic cabal in various banks across the earth, held illegally. And once these pedivores and pedophiles are taken down, that Trump will be able to confiscate these assets, which is actually talked about in his human trafficking executive order that he signed last December. And then what will be set up as we revert back to a constitutional common law system is that this our current fiat currency, which, as you know, has really no value anymore. It's been totally destroyed by the Federal Reserve, that will be done away with. And just as we go back to a constitutional common law type of judicial system, we also will go back to a gold-backed, precious metal-backed currency. And the particular article that I read said 100,000 a month. I don't know if that number is actually accurate. I do know there will be some kind of payout to individuals, and then there will also be monies used for humanitarian projects as well. What I do know for certain, as someone that's familiar with the Bible, is that if you go to Daniel chapter 11, verse 24, eventually this global reset is going to turn into this. And let me just find it here. It says, and it's referring to the son of perdition. The son of perdition shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province. And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches. Yea, he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even at a time. So it talks about this system and this individual that's actually scattering riches and wealth across the earth to people. And so again, I think it's probably going to begin really good, really legitimate, like a lot of things do. But then the devil's going to get in the middle of it, and it's going to turn. Because I was even talking to Stony Stone about this a few weeks ago, and he admitted to me, he said, they're probably going to have to do like 5 or 6 resets before they finally figure out how to keep the bad guys out of manipulating this currency and how we go about doing new things. But it'll be a glorious time because all this technology that's been suppressed from humanity is going to be released, and we're going to have all this incredible technology that's going to make life so much more simpler and beneficial. But that eventually they're probably going to, and Stony Stone admitted this to me, he said eventually probably the only way they're going to keep this global reset from really lasting is you'll have to get some kind of chip or something embedded into your body, or maybe get a DNA or some sort of a vaccine or something to put into your body with nanotechnology. And then finally, they'll be able to do this currency correctly. And of course, we know what that is. That's the mark of the beast. But I'll tell you, when I was preaching with a brother a couple years ago in Portland, he had this vision where he saw what it was like just before the Great Tribulation. And he said technology had advanced so much that literally people just could, with a flick of the wrist, just get anything they wanted. And this is what causes such a departure from Yahweh, and such a sort of a prideful human spirit. And I think that's where we're headed, because they're talking about how the 0-point gravity energy is going to be released, and they're going to have a train that goes around the globe and allows us to travel faster than even the modern airplane. And we'll have cars that have already been invented that run on water, but hasn't been released. A lot of the black projects and military, the stuff we see now is really 20, 30, 40, 50 years behind what they actually have. And it's because the evil cabal has kept this from us, and it's all going to be released. And again, it's going to start off good, but then it'll eventually turn into something very, very bad when the son of perdition gets in the middle. And you can study this, by the way, all through history. You study every great awakening or revival. It always starts off godly and amazing and wonderful, but then strange fire gets in. A good example of that is in the early 20th century in Hollywood, in fact, or near Hollywood in Los Angeles. There was a powerful move of the Spirit in 1903, and it started off as a genuine revival in Southern California. People were genuinely coming to repentance. But unfortunately, what happened is that one of the things that started happening in this revival is people started understanding about, for the first time, the real name of Jesus, his Hebrew name, Yeshua. And the leaders said, no, we're not going to do that. We're only going to stick with Jesus. We don't want to go into this Hebrew roots thing. And so immediately the revival died, and the denomination that came out of that was the Assembly of God. And the Assembly of God is why that assembly and denomination is so wicked, is because they started off with denying the true Hebrew name of Jesus, Yeshua. And so that's where that happened. So we see this all through history. We even see it in the first century and all revivals, where it starts off godly and awesome and wonderful, but then strange fire comes in. Paul warns that wolves are going to come in. And so we see this over and over again, and it'll happen again this time.
I'll give a little bit of response to that too, because I deal with a young man who, I believe he had a negative experience of a Hebrew roots group, and they do exist. Okay, we have our Torah cops, Torah terrorists, and we have some that go Talmudic for that matter. They're trying to be too Jewish somehow, which is utterly absurd. But he's trying to make the claim that the name Yeshua didn't come around until the 1800s. Well, I can tell you this from history again. There were, I think, mainly, and I don't remember all their names, but there were mainly 3 Jewish gentlemen who got the Hebrew language going again in the 1800s. The writings were always there, ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not. In fact, if you look in St. Paul's chapel there in New York, and that's, at Ground Zero, that was our original national capital. And I'm not sticking up for my forefathers, but when we officially became a sovereign nation on April 30th of 1789, when General Washington was inaugurated as our first president, they went in there to pray. That sacred name was on there back then, and that was what, in 1789. And it's not like they just built that little house there that day before and put it there. It had been there for a while. So the Hebrew language has always been around. It's always been in certain circles, but it was due to 3 gentlemen in the 1800s that really got it spreading and going again. They wanted the language back out. So it's not a made-up Yeshua, Yad-He-Vav-He, Yahuwah, however you are pronouncing it to the best of your ability. It is not a made-up fictional language. and Yeshua is not a made-up fictional name from the 1800s. The letter J is not in the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet anyway. In fact, it was never originally in the English language. It's Iesus is how they put it in the King James, the Geneva Bible, and so on. I think it was I'd have to find the exact date, or not the exact year. Was it 16?
It was in the, I believe it was,
44.
I believe it was,
I think it was around 1640 something when the letter J officially was initiated into our English alphabet.
Around the 1600s.
I'll find it.
One thing, I'm glad you brought this up because, there is a lot of roots, historical roots in our nation. In particular, if you study the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving, that was a Sukkot. That happened in October, and that was a Sukkot. In fact, the Canadians still celebrate their Thanksgiving in October, which is right around when the time of Sukkot happens. And they were having a feast of Sukkot during that time because the Pilgrims were keeping Torah, elements of Torah, even back then. Thanksgiving was not moved from October until the third week in November, until Abraham Lincoln made that proclamation to move it. So that Thanksgiving was originally in October. It was the Sukkot. The Pilgrims were keeping Sukkot. A lot of the early colonials were keeping Shabbat. Xmas was actually illegal in the Puritan and a lot of the Puritans' towns and town charters.
Let me expound on that, Dan. It was illegal in this nation, and if a pastor was caught doing a Christmas Eve service or a Christmas Day service, he was put in jail for it. They shackled him and hauled him off in a horse and carriage to take him to jail. Me as being the man of the house here, if we had a Christmas tree in our house and the authorities found out, I would be cuffed, stuffed, and put in jail for that in the United States. So I don't know if you knew that or not.
Well, so what my history research has shown is that that's definitely was the case in the Puritan pre-colonial America. By the time you get to 1776, most people were not celebrating Christmas. It was a fad in England. Most people weren't, but it wasn't necessarily illegal. It just hadn't. It really didn't come into the culture until around the 1800s. It was around between 1820 and 1840, 1860, when unfortunately Charles Dickens made it really popular with his Scrooge book, which I love the story Scrooge, but it basically called you a Scrooge if you were opposed to Christmas. And so that's when it really started getting into the United States culture. But yeah, you're right. Even in 1776, most people weren't doing it. But definitely in pre-colonial Puritan America, it was absolutely illegal because they understood the utter paganism, the birth of Saturnalia on December the 25th, all the paganism surrounded, the birth of Ra, all this paganism stuff on the 25th of December. It's also, by the way, a very satanic, Kabbalistic time where they sacrifice babies and do that just a few days prior on the winter solstice. So that, and I talk about this also in my Kenneth Copeland video. One of their, the woman remembers one of the greatest times of them sacrificing these babies was on Ishtar, Easter, which we should have nothing to do with either, because that has nothing to do with what Yahshua did when he died on Passover and rose 3 days and 3 nights later and was found to be resurrected on the Feast of First Fruits. We need to go back to what the Hebrew roots of the Christian faith teaches, what Jesus actually did and celebrated in the first century, because not only is this stuff taught in the Bible, but even a lot of our early roots talk about this. Now, I understand a lot of the founding fathers were deists and they didn't have an intimate relationship with God. Some of them did, but not all of them. But certainly the Puritans and the Pilgrims and these people that originally came over here, man, they knew the scriptures. Many of them were filled with the Spirit, and they were trying to obey the Torah as much as they could. And so we need to remember that this is part of the fabric of our society that we've turned away from in quite a dramatic fashion. I think the reason why so many of these Luciferian, satanic pedophiles and pedophores are controlling this nation is because the church is asleep. Because if the church were awake, if we were mightily filled with the Spirit and going forth, we wouldn't have this stuff going on, right? But a lot of us, like Keith Green says in his song, we're asleep in the light. So it's my hope that many people that claim to be believers and lovers of Messiah will awaken and really start returning back to the roots of not only Scripture, but fighting this war. And we can take this stuff down now because we have an opportunity, I believe, under Trump, who, by the way, these allegations of Trump being a pedophile or Satanist are so false. Jesus said to judge people by their fruits, and we can judge Trump by what he's done over the last 2 years. This guy has done more than any president to crack down on child sex trafficking. You don't do that if you're a Satanist. Give me a break. And he's doing it, and he's doing it quite effectively. And I think God definitely, well, God always ordains our leadership, and we're commanded to pray for our leaders in the New Testament. And Yah, I think, is using Trump for this moment in history to allow us to rise up like this. And I also want to ask everyone, please, I got this White House petition, 1,000 signatures by October 28th, and then they are legally bound to respond. So far, I've only gotten like 300, and I put it up on Thursday night. I've only gotten like 330 signatures. In order to get that 100,000 mark, I've got to get like 3,000 to 4,000 signatures a day. So we got to make this viral. We got to get it out there because I really want the White House to respond to this petition.
After the live chat, I want you to help me when we're on private, when I make this private, so I can sign it too.
Well, the link is below all my. You go. My recent video is right before Shabbat.
Okay.
You just go to the link to the petition is like right below my videos. So I've started putting them below my videos. You just click on that link, and that's exactly how to fill it out. And remember, this is very important. When you sign the petition, it's going to ask you to verify your email. If you don't verify that email, your signature will not be counted. And as far as I can tell, you do not have to be a United States citizen because it doesn't require that. It just literally requires your email and everything. I've had Australians and Canadians. But the one thing is, do not make up another email address and sign more than once. Otherwise, it'll make the whole petition null and void. So only sign once, no matter where you are. So I have that out there that I want to make viral. And then I got this November 9th, 2018 event where we're going to stand in front of the White House and lift up our voices and say we support Trump. We want these satanic pedophiles brought down. And it's my hope that it will cause a change, because we see in the book of Acts for the disciples with just, a couple fishermen filled with the Spirit, covered by the blood, they preached and they turned the entire Roman Empire upside down, or rather right side up. And I think we can do the same thing now.
Okay. Well, this is kind of off the subject, and I don't think I'm going to address every little thing that I've seen in the side chat. No, I'm not in support of the Zionist Jews and what they do. My Jewish counterparts, if you will, and that's a very loose term. The word Jew or Jewish is way too loose and has different contexts. It depends on it depends on what context somebody's trying to use it in. For starters, I'm Levitical, more than likely. I'm not from the tribe of Judah, but from Levi. Now, if you're talking like the conservative Jews, the Orthodox Jews, Reformed Jews, Karaite Jews, no, I'm not in support of that. I actually have a good friend on a brotherly, Philatos or Philadelphia brotherly love, who's a Karaite Jewish Hakam, but he knows very well where I stand, that the Messiah is Yeshua. Some of those Jews that you're talking about in Hollywood, I don't even know if they deserve to be called that. At least my Jewish counterparts go, at least they twist things and all that, and they add things on with the Talmud, but at least they're doing a little bit, whereas some of those cryptic Jews and whatever, when you're into that kind of stuff like pedophilia, pedivore, stealing everybody's money and so on, I don't know how they could even be Jewish, for starters. Secondly, go back to the beginning anyway. Jews really didn't exist. It was Hebrews/Israelites, all in the Torah. The first mention of Jews is in 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 6, and that's when the 10 northern tribes were taken captive by the Assyrians. And the first Jew named by name, I believe, is Esther chapter 2, verse 5, which is Mordecai. So when they start, Zionist, Khazar, what's that other one? Ashkenazi. I'm not in support of that. Well, that's fine. I agree with you, the great remote viewer, but have you actually read all of one of the Talmuds? I've read all the Babylonians, so I can give an informed opinion on it. Yes, it is satanic. It is wicked. It is evil, and it should be burned. Now I have to deal with it because I have Jewish counterparts that I want to get into salvation. In order to help do that, I have to know where they're coming from. So I
Yeah,
know a
one
lot about the Talmud, but you guys asking these questions, do we support them? If you're meaning like, do I support what they do? No, of course not. It,
there's a
that's a broad question. Put it that way.
there's a
Go
couple
ahead.
issues, yeah, and for some reason I don't see the chat screen, so I don't see. I mean, I see the chat screen, but I don't see anyone putting their chat remarks in my screen. So I don't know why. But anyway, one thing that I want to point out is that the Talmud it should be burned because it actually sanctions pedophilia, child sex. There's a section in there. The Talmud, the Zohar, the Kabbalah, these things should have nothing to do with Judaism. What true Judaism is, there's like what you were saying, there's 12 tribes, and Judah is 1/12 of Israel. And true Jews, as Paul talks about, and as it's talked about in the Torah, are those who are covered by the blood, serving Messiah, filled with the Spirit, and obeying the Torah. That's a true Jew. So we reject the Talmud, we reject the Kabbalah, we reject the Zohar. I have articles about this on my website that I've had for years, where we reject all that nonsense. But the other thing to realize too is that, when Yahweh allowed the UN to form Israel, even though there's going to be a counterfeit, son of perdition that will rule over Israel, God uses even Satan for his purposes. Okay, he uses the bad guys and the good guys to accomplish his purposes on earth. So that Israel, even though it will be led by the son of perdition, will eventually be the Israel where Yahshua, the carpenter from Nazareth, returns and rules and reigns, and Jerusalem is made a praise in all the earth. And of course, during the millennial kingdom, you'll have Israel ruling from the Nile River in Egypt all the way to the Euphrates. It'll be the original land grant that was given to Abraham. And Israel will be basically the ruler of the world at that point. And Yahshua will rule from the rising of the sun to the setting of the sun with a rod of iron. And the Torah will go forth from Zion, as it says. And Jerusalem will be made a praise in all the earth. And it's going to be a beautiful and glorious time, that 1,000-year kingdom. But a lot of this stuff that's been set up, people try to say, well, it's all satanic and stuff like that. Even if it was satanic, Yah's allowing it because it's eventually going to lead toward the great, glorious 1,000-year kingdom that's being prepared. So people need to keep that in mind.
Yep. You're not blocked to my knowledge, the great remote viewer. I thank you for subbing. Try to sub to Daniel John Lee too. Denage Lion 7. I'll type it in if you're not already. I don't. Oh yeah, well, I'll let you put that link in. Okay. I've got the internet is acting up. We're having issues here. I can hear Daniel, no problem. I can see the chat, no problem. But to scroll up or do anything like that again, as the old story is. There we go. If you type that into YouTube, you'll find the guy that I'm interviewing. So I'll let my wife try to put in some links. We're just, for me to go from channel to channel and do windows is it's not going to work very well at this time of night, folks. I'm sorry, but that's why I didn't even put up Daniel's link, because it'll take me 10 minutes to do it. Anyway, that's why I keep emphasizing on my reading videos. I did all of the Restoration Study Bible on God's Holy Walking Saints Ministry, Merle and Deborah Como. I got permission from Senior Pastor Randy Follier to do this because the Restoration Study Bible comes from Yahweh's Restoration Ministry, and it's a Hebraic offshoot of the King James. And I'm doing my readings now on this channel directly, and I'm going through the Jewish Publication Society of America. It's 1962 copyright. And I'm emphasizing to everyone that they need to read their own Bibles. That's what's going to fool you if you don't. When these things are happening and you think things are going well, and when things go bad enough to where you start to figure out, hey, what's going on here? It's because you're guilty of not communing with Yah the way you should. And one of them is through his word, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel can, and Isaac Cappy and Fiona Barnett and whomever else, they can give you all this information, until the cow jumps over the moon. But if you're not spiritually right, if you're not doing this modern day Shema, if you're not being obedient and keeping the commandments, you're kind of screwed anyway. It's just the way it's going to be. So that's I think it's great when you people sub to me and you come to view live and pre-recorded, in my readings, and I love it when you're reading along and you have questions and comments for me to respond to. But it's still, you need to do your own reading as well. So because it's there for you. The apostles, almost all of them died, were martyred. The only one that didn't was Apostle John, and he didn't have a bed of roses. He was put in a boiling cauldron of oil. Then he was put in jail on the island of Patmos. And then you got how many pilgrims? You got how many? I don't take this wrong, but you have a lot of Roman Catholic priests who saw what was going on with the church, and they lost their lives because they translated it into the common man's language so they could read the scriptures for themselves instead of having to depend on the church with the Latin language, which they couldn't make heads or tails of because they weren't taught any of it. We need, so honor those people as well. Read your Bibles. Simply put, it's not rocket science here, folks. And if you have a hard time understanding it at first, that's okay. Yah will give you what you're ready for at that time. So, anything else, Daniel? Or
Yeah, I mean, I just want to comment on people are asking me, well, Dan, what gospel are you preaching? Well, I'm preaching the true gospel. It's from Hebrews chapter 8. It's rooted in Jeremiah 31:31. But Hebrews chapter 8 is so clear in what it says that this Torah, it's not passed away. It's just now, rather than being inscribed on tablets of stone, now it's been written on our hearts. And in fact, underneath the video I just posted about head coverings, I put a 17-part teaching that I made, spent hundreds of hours doing in 2017, where it goes through all of Paul's writings and it reconciles Torah, Paul, and what Messiah taught. And I think it would really be eye-opening to a lot of Christians to see that, the New Testament really does teach us to obey the Torah. But if you go to Hebrews chapter 8, I'm just going to read this here real quickly because it is the true gospel. It says very clearly, it says, for this covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. Remember, according to Ephesians 2, all humanity, Jew or Gentile, can be grafted into the commonwealth of Israel through the blood of Christ. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Yahweh. I will put my Torah, my laws, into their mind and write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a Yah, and they shall be to me a people. You see, God is putting, when Yahshua died on that stake on Passover and shed his blood and then rose 3 days and 3 nights later, he did that in order to give us the freedom to obey his commandments, which always bring freedom as long as we fall in love with him first. So we fall in love with him. He changes us. He fills us with his spirit. And then we want to obey. We have an inward desire to want to obey the very laws that we once hated. When I didn't know Messiah, I didn't want anything to do with this book. Or if I did, it was a very traditional, and I'd make my own traditions around it or whatever, not really serving it with the heart, and which is what happens in a lot of Christianity and modern Judaism. But when you truly fall in love with him, when your heart breaks and you're filled with his spirit, then you now have a desire to want to do this. It's not like, oh, I have to keep Shabbat. No, you want to love your neighbors yourself. You want to eat clean foods. You don't want to murder or steal or cheat or bear false witness. Okay, these are things that start coming naturally to you because now you're a new man. The Spirit's filled you. And it says, whomever the Son has set free is free indeed. These commandments bring freedom. They always bring freedom. Always. Every single commandment. When you do it out of a love for the Messiah, out of it simply just wanting to put a smile on his face, they bring you joy. Now, if you're just doing this out of rote and you don't have the Spirit, you're not loving the Messiah, yeah, it'll just convict you. You'll be under this burdensome law. It'll just be convicting. Same law that would convict you when you don't love him. When you do love him, it's ordained unto life. That's what Paul says in Romans 7. This book is ordained unto life. And so that's the great power of the gospel, that his blood and the indwelling of his Spirit within us sets us free from sin. We don't have to sin. 1 John 3, 6 through 11 says, whosoever is born of Yah does not commit sin. Now, obviously, if you do, you need to repent, get on your face, make things right. But we can live as overcomers. We can overcome through his indwelling blood. If we're just going to be living in sin and always sinning, then what's the point? What power? How? That's a weak gospel. That's a counterfeit Jesus. We might as well just live like the world. But what sets us apart, what makes us peculiar, what makes us Israel, is that through his power, through his indwelling spirit, and by his word, we can be overcomers. And we can live habitually overcoming sin and keeping our eyes fixed on Messiah and doing his will and being fathers of the faith, as it talks about all through the book of 1 John. In fact, I'll just read it real quickly, because this is from the New Testament, and it just so clearly, I think, enunciates the power of the true gospel. In 1 John chapter 3, starting in verse 6, it says, actually, I'll start in verse 4. It says, whosoever committeth sin transgresses also the Torah. So we know sin is transgressing the Torah, knowingly transgressing the Torah. And I know a lot of people don't know about Torah because they've been mistaught. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying if you know, you're only held accountable for what you know. Whosoever commits sin transgresses also the Torah, for sin is the transgression of the Torah. And you know that he was manifest to take away our sins, and in him is no sin. Whosoever abides in the Messiah, in Yahshua, sins not. Whosoever sins has not seen him, neither known him. Little children, let no man deceive you. He that does righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. And he that commits sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose, the Son of Yah, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, Yahshua, was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God commits sin, for his seed remains in him, and he cannot sin because he's born of Yahweh. In this, the children of Yah are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of God, neither he that loveth not his brother. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Either you're walking in selfishness or you're walking in love. The two are mutually exclusive. And that's where we need his spirit and the Messiah, because we cannot walk in love without the indwelling of his spirit, without his blood washing our sins and cleansing our conscience from what we did in our past. But it's only through him that we can do this, and it's only by his blood that we can gain salvation. So through his spirit, we can walk in love. And that's why it's so critical to have a relationship with the Messiah, be filled with his love, have that armor of God on if you're going to go into this fight of taking down these satanic pedophiles. This is why I pray for Isaac Cappy, because I know Isaac, as much as God used it to wake me up, Isaac does not have a relationship with the Messiah. He believes in reincarnation and all these things. And so I pray for him, and I pray that Fiona can be a good influence on him, which I believe she is. But I pray for these people, because you put yourself in a dangerous position when you try to come against these cabals and you're not walking in the spirit with Messiah living inside you. It doesn't work. He's got to be on the throne of your heart. He's got to be enthroned on the throne of your heart, because it says the heart is deceitful above all things. Sitting on that heart of yours, you're going to be in big trouble coming against these big-time satanic enemies. So I encourage everyone who's going to take a stand on this, get right with Yah.
Okay, just to explain this to some of these people, we do not give out our exact address or location to most people. Some people have it that we know we can trust. But with my wife's former relationship and past, it's just a good idea not to. Our kids, the boy's dad is an illegal alien, for one thing. And I'm also with Trump on those views, just to make that clear. But this guy's not doing anything that's good to better himself or become a legal citizen, to my knowledge. He is drug dealt. He is beating the living snot out of my now current wife and the kids. Made many drug deals. He used to perform acts with other women that he wasn't married to. And he would leave his son out in the car. His son would get curious and so on and wonder what's going on and look in the window and being able to see all that. I mean, I could go on and on all night about what this guy's about. I've actually met him.
Plus,
And
we've had
anyway,
previous death threats.
but
throughout
you know,
13
anyway,
years.
when she had to leave him for the sake of hers and now our kids' lives, he's tried to find out where we are. I will confront it, no problem, if he comes to the front door somehow. But I'd rather avoid that, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't give out our location. I used to give out my phone number public. Well, I eventually had to change the number because he called incessantly. So that's the reason why we don't give out our exact location.
Well, there's other reasons too.
Well, there's other reasons, but you know, my point is we're not going to give it out. Either you believe us or you don't. So, and there may come a time where we do give it out again, you know, and let this guy, if he has changed for the better, to go ahead and find out where his son is and be able to meet with him under very secure circumstances. I don't know yet, but even when we've let him talk to our son, you know, then he pushes it even further and tries to get hold of other people that know us and give them a sob story. So we're staying secure. We're not giving out that information. Like I said, I've given it out only to certain people, and I expect that they don't give it out to anyone else. But anyway, that's my answer to some of the questions to Patrick, the heretic. I don't really know what else to address. It's just I'm kind of at a loss for words here. Dan has given out a lot of information here. I think you've been feeling some heat here, like you said. Some people have been harassing you too, and you get a lot of ridiculous comments. You get a lot better, you get a lot more that are good, I think, in your comment section. But from what you told me, but you always have those people that like to, I don't know, they're trollers or they're in darkness.
Yeah, the more trolls attacks I get, the higher my subscribers go. So whatever their intended effect is, it's not working. So hallelujah for that. And of course, Messiah reminds us, and this goes for all of you out there who love him, whenever you get persecuted or attacked, it just means you're getting more and more riches and wealth in eternity. So, you know, when they attack and revile and persecute, just say, keep it coming, because the more you do it, the more wealthy I become in heaven. So, but yeah, that's pretty much for this update tonight. I appreciate you having me on your show, and looking forward to doing this maybe again in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep tabs. If people can pray for both of our channels, I know I'm getting some threats supposedly that I'm going to have legal action put on me because I'm mentioning that person's name. But let me tell you this to you, if you're listening right now, and I won't say your name. You have had both of your channels flagged to where you couldn't do live streams. One of them is currently shut down. So you're using your original channel to do live stream. If you mess with me and do that, you will be hit very hard. And you have a record on YouTube. Do not think that I will sit back and let you do that to me without repercussions. And I'm not doing it, I get you, you get me. I am teaching truth on this channel. I'm trying to get out the evil, and so we can do something about it. I'm also teaching truth and reading it. And that's my goal. So if you could quit commenting to me, so-and-so, that'd be great. You went your way. Hopefully, I know I've gone my way. I'm starting to wonder now. But that being said, I want to thank Daniel for giving this information so freely onto a much smaller channel. I do feel that the Ruach is leading me to help with this. I'm on a lot of links simultaneously. I think I'm probably a little more well-known than I realize, but we need to get this exposed. We need to shout it at the rooftops. And folks, you need to learn. You need to figure out what your role is as an individual, of how you want to deal with this. Some of you may be only meant to be prayer warriors. Some of you may be meant to do videos on it, like I've been doing a little bit, or maybe even on a higher level, like Daniel John Lee has been doing. You know, figure it out. Get in prayer, read Yah's word, and see where he's taking you with that. And again, I always make this clear, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of every one of my live streams. Read your Bibles on your own personal time. keep the commandments, obey Yah's will according to you as an individual, and endure and stay steadfast till the end, you have my full permission to go ahead and share this video and all the other videos on Levi Cahn here and on God's Holy Walking Saints Ministry, Merle and Deborah Como, on all of your links. And for those of you who also have YouTube channels, if you want to go ahead and upload this onto your YouTube channel, you have my full permission to do that. I think Daniel's going to do that with this video on his channel as soon as we're done. So let's get this out. We have so many people blasting these evil, iniquitous, satanic people that they don't know what to do. You know, they're running scared from what I can tell. Because if they weren't, I don't think Daniel would be around anymore. Frankly, at least his YouTube channels would be shut down. So, anything else you want to say before I close it up?
No, I enjoyed the interview, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
Okay, no problem. And we'll try to set up an engagement for another time to do this as you keep getting info and that and whatever. All right, folks. Peace. Shalom. We're out of here.
Shalom, shalom.